Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining me. All right, this is our very first LinkedIn live stream and the launch of our inaugural State of the Industry Report live from Event Concept Studios here in central London. A couple of quick housekeeping items before we get started. We have reserved time for questions at the end, so please submit them in the comments field. I also encourage you to provide your thoughts in the comments as we will be taking those input and utilizing that for future content and events. Finally, the report will be ready for download later today. You'll find it under Insights on our website at iMasons.org. That's iMasons.org. Now, on to the report. My name is Dean Nelson. I'm the founder and chairman of iMasons. A big welcome to our community members, partners, advisory council, and board members. I also welcome those of you who are joining our event for the first time. iMasons is a professional association with 6,000 people representing over 200 billion of digital infrastructure projects in 130 countries. We launched our community in 2016 to unite the builders of the digital age. Today, we are proud to have united the industry on a greater digital future. We do that by driving impact through our strategic pillars: education, inclusion, innovation, and sustainability. Let me share some examples. We've helped advance curriculum in digital infrastructure, awarded over $1 million in scholarships in over 30 countries, and provided thousands of devices to seniors and students through our Digital Infrastructure Futures Foundation. Our Inclusion Committee has increased the number of women, underrepresented minorities, and armed forces entering our industry. Our Innovation Committee has helped advance new technology developments by raising awareness and connecting entrepreneurs to buyers and investors. Finally, in 2022, our members also founded the iMasons Climate Accord, which has united over 260 companies representing over $6 trillion of combined market cap on decarbonization of digital infrastructure across materials, equipment, and power. A lot of work has been done since our inception, but I feel like we're just getting started, especially now. Digital infrastructure capacity is forecasted to triple over the next 10 years due to the rapid AI-driven engagements over the last 12 months. The rate of global adoption of this technology is unprecedented, and the implications of that adoption on the global capacity we provide is formidable. Never before has the world's digital infrastructure been more critical to our work, our life, and the very survival of our planet. With that, let's dig in. Today, I'm going to share details in our first State of the Industry report. Over the last year, we engaged with over 500 contributors across 50 countries to gather their input. This included one-on-one conversations with owners of some of the largest digital infrastructure platforms in the world, to member meetings, advisory council sessions, and collaboration workshops with our strategic partners. In accordance with iMasons' values, all content was anonymized except where noted. The content gathered from members was then synthesized into this publication. I want to personally thank all of our members who extended their trust to share details with us on what they are facing and the trends that have led to the conclusions I'll be sharing today. This data gathering approach provides a unique perspective about the digital infrastructure industry that is difficult to achieve in any other forum. It surfaces the industry's biggest challenges to responsible and sustainable growth, and provides insights into trends and conditions in established and emerging markets. Digital infrastructure is the new utility, a necessity to participate in the modern world, just like running water and electricity. It is the great equalizer that enables anyone, anywhere to participate in the digital economy. Our community represents an industry that is enabling trillions of dollars of economic opportunity for companies and people around the world. The intent of this report is to provide a view into the industry to spark ideas, collaboration, partnership, and drive responsible and sustainable progress as our industry faces some of the most daunting challenges to date. This report also provides a holistic picture of the importance of digital infrastructure and a guide to strategic decisions about where, when, and how digital infrastructure is built, operated, and maintained. iMasons believes it is essential for us that this growth occurs in an economically, ecologically, and socially responsible and sustainable manner. The report is available to the public and was prepared for an audience of policymakers, economic development officers, investors, civic leaders, and neighbors in the local communities where digital infrastructure is deployed. The iMasons board and myself are responsible for the content of this report. We invite you to reach out with questions and welcome your support in our mission of a greater digital future. So let me start with some baseline information. First, what is digital infrastructure? Digital infrastructure is a collection of data center locations that deliver electronic services to people and machines. Essentially, everything we do or machines do for us through our devices is served through digital infrastructure. Today, it is as important to any community as its airport, train station, waterworks, power generation, transmission lines, and substation. It enables technologies that people use every day to connect, communicate, work, and play. It's the utility of the digital age and is woven into the fabric of modern life. In 2021, iMasons reported that the digital infrastructure industry had 7 million data center locations around the world with a combined capacity of 105 gigawatts and an annual electricity consumption of 594 terawatt hours, representing 2.4% of the global electricity draw. Demand for electronic services will double and could triple the size of the industry over the next decade. Some of the largest portfolios in the world said that what they have built in the last 10 plus years will double in the next 2 years. Absolutely incredible. I've been in this industry for 35 years and have never seen this level of demand and subsequent expansion, that activity at this rate. Consider this new demand on the heels of a global pandemic that drove its own level of global expansion. The world has recognized the need for digital infrastructure, and AI has given everyone an easy button. It is the perfect storm. Our global member discussions identified 4 critical challenges to fulfill this extraordinary demand. Those global challenges center on access to power capacity, attracting and retaining people, addressing industry perception to ensure we are a good neighbor where we operate and as well as maintaining commitments to protect the planet. So let's dive into each of these challenges a bit further. Access to power capacity is the #1 challenge in growth across the industry. Without power, there is no digital economy. Today, all major data center markets are effectively out of capacity, with an average vacancy of 6% across the Americas and EMEA, with the largest markets in Northern Virginia and Silicon Valley at less than 3%. APAC vacancy is at 10%, but major markets such as Singapore are at an all-time low of 2%. Our report shows that while there is over 60 gigawatts of net new data center power capacity in the pipeline globally, only 10 gigawatts is currently under construction, and the delivery timeframes do not align with the current demands. 70% of that demand is in the Americas and Europe, but unavailable in the markets where it is needed most. Today, access to power is constrained and threatens to stunt the advancements of civil society that digital infrastructure enables. Some markets lack power generation capacity, others lack power transmission and distribution capacity. Other complications include interconnection study delays, supply chain bottlenecks for transformers and generators, and substation contract slippage. These constraints are forcing a rethink of where to locate data centers. To address the power challenges today, some digital infrastructure developers are scoping new project sites with access to reliable power capacity that are adjacent to established data center hubs where access to fiber is also available. Other developers are moving to second and third tier market cities that have available power capacity. Regions further afield with abundant and established sources of clean power, such as hydroelectric and geothermal, are also getting the second look for development of data center campuses. Bottom line, the demand is at an all-time high and the supply is at an all-time low, with no relief in sight. A mid to long-term solution may rest in master-planned clean energy zones, which I'll expand on later in this broadcast. The second biggest industry challenge is attracting, training, and retaining people. Sustaining the industry growth requires that people to build them, maintain, and operate this infrastructure. Yet the industry currently faces an estimated shortfall of 300,000 people by 2025. People are needed to build data centers and rack servers, design and configure networks, power and cooling systems, connect electric power systems, maintain and operate equipment, secure facilities, and troubleshoot technical issues. The industry needs general contractors and construction workers. It needs architects, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, and network engineers. It needs facilities technicians, HVAC technicians, and electricians. It also needs people experienced in finance, sales, marketing, and communications, as well as people to manage the supply chain logistics, sustainability programs, and human resources. Digital infrastructure needs people as much as people need digital infrastructure. Another concern is that the current workforce is graying out. Surveys indicate that 70% of the people employed in the industry are 45 years or older. Estimates from Uptime Institute shows that 40% of the current workforce is expected to retire within 15 years. We need solutions to fill the pipeline now to address the current and future gaps in people resources. One method is to turn an industry challenge into a solution. Women represent half of the world's population. Today, the digital infrastructure industry employs less than 10% females. We could potentially solve this problem by tapping into this talent pool alone. Another solution is to find, hire, and train people from outside of the industry. Many leaders in our industry today have built and operated other types of major infrastructure earlier in their careers, from airports and hospitals to hotels and stadiums. Some digital infrastructure companies have found success hiring mechanical and electrical engineers from oil refineries and the shipping industry. Others are championing military veterans and transitioning armed forces personnel as underutilized talent resources. Many veterans bring leadership skills along with expertise in mechanical electrical engineering. They have experience operating and maintaining complex machinery and systems from aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines to mobile operations command centers. To effectively leverage any of these resource pipelines, the industry needs to make them aware of the opportunities and invest in their training. The third biggest challenge is that the public is gaining a negative perception of the digital infrastructure industry as its footprint physically grows. Many builders of the digital age say that people outside of our industry lack an understanding of digital infrastructure. They believe this causes pushback as the physical footprint expands in communities it serves. This challenges growth. While this may be true, it's also true that digital infrastructure developers are often aloof from the communities where they build. To overcome this challenge, our industry must work together with local leaders to ensure that each data center is a welcome member of the community. Today, the words quiet, secretive, and opaque describe the digital infrastructure industry. These traits allow the industry to acquire land, power, and other resources needed to build and operate data centers without driving up cost and community resistance. Once the infrastructure is live, the industry prefers to remain out of the public eye. This is rooted in a desire to protect the privacy and security of the data contained inside the data centers and routed along the fiber optic cables. Yet, this lack of transparency deepens mistrust. What's more, seeking privacy through secrecy is an illusion. Online maps reveal that the location of nearly every data center, fiber optic cable, and other piece of digital infrastructure around the world. Meanwhile, the industry's clandestine nature precludes the authentic community engagement required to hear and address concerns that it employs few people, raises prices for land, consumes an unfair share of power and water, disturbs the peace, disrupts the view, and pollutes the air. The industry must demonstrate it hears these concerns with steps to address them. It must show up at community meetings, listen to civic, business, and government leaders, and work with them to find solutions to points of contention. It must do this wherever it establishes a presence, from Chicago to Cape Town and Mumbai to Monterey. As the digital infrastructure industry continues to grow, data centers will become a fixture in communities around the world to enhance communications and deliver low latency electronic services to people and machines there and everywhere else. The expansion of this data center footprint requires our industry to be a good neighbor in every community it serves. It must demonstrate its ability to engage with local government and civic industry groups, listen to their concerns, and learn to compromise, adapt, and change. Bottom line, if digital infrastructure wants to be perceived as a good neighbor, it must be a good neighbor. The fourth biggest industry challenge is the planet. As iMasons members discuss the challenges of power, people, and perception driven by the unprecedented demand for digital infrastructure, a concerning trend seemed to emerge: growth at all costs. The industry will grow to meet demand, but without a deliberate focus on decarbonization and growth decisions, the industry's carbon footprint will significantly increase, making net zero commitments unachievable. The time frame for digital infrastructure's growth coincides with commitments from the world's biggest companies to achieve net zero carbon emissions. In today's world, rapid industry growth and decarbonization are diametrically opposed. While companies remain committed to decarbonization, carbon reduction requirements are scarce in requests for proposals sent to suppliers. The purchasing decisions of the digital infrastructure industry shape decarbonization markets, policy, and behavior. The industry must stay focused on decarbonization as it races to meet demand. It must incentivize carbon avoidance projects, double down on cost-effective carbon sequestration, and use holistic carbon accounting. This starts with budget tracking for carbon. Seems simple. Companies need to know their carbon debt, what increases are planned in that carbon debt, and the actions to reduce that carbon debt to zero as quickly as possible. Realities drive the need for holistic carbon accounting. For example, clean power capacity is constrained by location and lacks cost-effective, long-duration storage to replace baseload. Production of carbon-negative materials and equipment is immature and not funded to scale. The pace of clean tech lags the demand for digital infrastructure. As a result, carbon debt will increase, at least in the short term. The industry must track this accumulating debt and accelerate the decarbonization technologies that pay it down. This consistent carbon debt measurement will allow key decision makers to see the impact of their investments and justify solutions that simultaneously achieve economic, social, and ecological goals. Over the long term, the industry's focus on decarbonization could usher in an era of abundant clean power and carbon-negative materials and equipment. The iMasons Climate Accord, which launched in April of 2022, unites the digital infrastructure industry on decarbonization through measurement and reduction of carbon in materials, equipment, and power. This focus from over 260 member companies, with a combined market cap of $6 trillion, can drive the behaviors and spark the innovations needed to counter the growth at all cost concerns. All right, so far I've outlined the unparalleled global challenges facing our industry. The big question is, what do we do about them? Deeper conversations amongst iMasons members spawned a potential solution to simultaneously address the challenges around people, planet, perception, and power. It's called Clean Energy Zones. What are they? Clean Energy Zones are master planned towns or city-sized areas developed around concentrated sources of clean energy to serve multiple industries, including multi-tenant data center complexes. This builds upon the concept of moving the data center to the power versus the power to the data center. This allows us to drive optimization on every level for our own use and the solutions for power, people, perception, and the planet to scale. These clean energy zones can be as small as 100 megawatts in emerging markets like Africa and Latin America, to 10 gigawatt zones in larger markets such as the US. This is all about economies of scale and leveraging localized complementary components to compound the result. For example, complementary power-intensive industries could co-locate in these zones and seed communities filled with skilled people resources. The zones could also help scale next-generation materials such as green concrete and clean energy technologies, including sustainable storage, renewable fuels, small modular reactors, hydrogen fuel cells, enhanced geothermal, and fusion. So let's back up and look at the bigger picture. The tripling of the industries combined with competing industries' equivalent power needs and the electrification and digitization of everything, there is no way for us to efficiently and sustainably solve the demand problem within the time frame in front of us. So clean energy zones are a strategy that could help us in every market in every part of the world and unite different industries to accelerate our progress and compound the results. It's something I hope that governments and civic leaders, investors, and the players in our industry will consider. I've shared a lot of information today, but I have one more element before we jump into Q&A. Market insights. So also, I encourage you to post your questions in the chat. I look forward to answering as many of them as I can at the end. The challenges and opportunities for the digital infrastructure industry are universal, though they differ in different details between established markets and emerging markets. But first, the protection of the planet must remain a top priority in every market if we are going to meet our net zero carbon goals. In established markets, a combination of power generation, power transmission, and supply chain constraints are driving new data center developments to locations outside of the industry's central hubs that have available power capacity. Skilled people are required to support our new growth as well as replace industry veterans near retirement. The industry must engage with communities where it builds to challenge or change the perception of the industry by effectively integrating into the local ecosystem. In emerging markets, access to reliable clean power is a challenge in some regions and an opportunity in others. Also, an oversupply of people must be trained to account for workers who will be lured abroad. And there's potential to earn a positive perception in these emerging market communities from day one as new digital infrastructure deployments start emerging in towns and cities everywhere. This is apparent in 3 focus areas we highlight in this report: Africa, Latin America, and India. These 3 regions stand out for their growth potential and opportunity to leapfrog the industry's past challenges. Africa, Latin America, and India are home to 3.5 billion people, or 44% of the world's population, reflecting a median age of 28.2. Today, these 3 regions account for just 5% of the global live data center capacity, but they represent the largest future consumption and market growth driven by the youngest population on the planet. They are our future consumers and leaders. Projects under construction, committed to be built, or in the early stages of development are on pace to quintuple capacity over the next 5 to 10 years. Fulfilling the demand for digital infrastructure is not optional. The world needs it to advance and thrive. iMasons believes our industry approach to addressing these expansion challenges must be deliberate. Responsible and sustainable growth that's economically, socially, and ecologically in balance with communities requires collaboration with governments, utilities, development agencies, investors, and civic leaders. Together, we can solve our biggest challenges and ensure a greater digital future for all. Okay, those are the highlights of the report. There's much more detail in the report itself, and I encourage everyone to download it and share it with your colleagues and the communities you live in. Before we close, though, I want to address some of the questions that have come back in. So, give me just 1 second here. All right. So, wow, okay, they're flooding in. Thanks, and please continue to put those back in. So, first question that's coming back in is, can you talk more about how iMasons gathered data for this report? So we held member meetings, advisory council sessions, local chapter meetings. So think of all of our community members in these different forums all over the world. They engaged independently, and then also I led a number of those sessions all around the world. In addition to that, we had one-on-one conversations with some of the biggest owners of the portfolios in the world. And what was great about that is because of the forum we set up, they can share more information because it's anonymized. And from there, we can glean even more insights that we probably wouldn't be able to glean elsewhere. But as I mentioned at the beginning, we had over 500 different people participate in these sessions all over the world in the last year. All that information was then synthesized together, and it came up through this report. Okay, next question. Do you foresee the 4 priorities changing in future years? I think these are universal, and I'm not sure how long they will be, but we've always had kind of power challenges. We've always had people challenges. I think the perception is new because we've grown. And when it comes down to the planet itself, last year, planet was number 1. This year, it was lower. And what we ended up doing was migrating that back up because as we started having the discussions, people had not changed their decarbonization commitments, but they have this huge demand to deliver in a time frame that is unprecedented again. So I think that to answer the question directly, I think they will change. I think a priority might change, the listing of that, and there could be additional ones that emerge because we don't know exactly what we don't know yet. 24 months ago, Gen AI was in the labs. Nobody knew what was going to happen because of generative AI. Today, it is the largest growth curve in our history. So in the future, we'll see exactly what this means for the priorities for the industry. Okay, which which emerging markets are highlighted. We have Africa, India, and Latin America, very specifically. So for example, India has 1.4 million people, and I believe it has 687 megawatts worth of total data center capacity, live capacity, for the entire country. There is almost 600 million people in Latin America, and I believe they've got 799 megawatts of capacity. And then the surprising one is Africa. They've got 1.4 million people, 54 countries, a whole bunch of languages, but they have less than 300 megawatts of total capacity for the entire continent. It's mind-blowing when you think about 44% of the world's population, and we have 5% of the total capacity across those three markets. So when we say quintuple, I believe that's just the start. So for example, India right now has in the pipeline, even though they're less than 700 megawatts total live capacity, there's 10 gigawatts in the pipeline, plus. So that market is exploding probably at the fastest pace. And then right behind that, you've got Latin America and Africa. But we felt it was really important to go back and highlight those because of the nature of the demographics and the lack of resources that are actually in field right now. We just think people need to understand that there's a huge demand that needs to be served there because 44% of the population is not going to stop. All right, so can you expand on the clean energy portion of the report? Absolutely. So the clean energy zones were a pattern that emerged in all these different conversations, and it actually came up probably in the last 2 months because we kept seeing the way that people were talking about the larger developments. For example, 10 megawatts used to be a big deal. 10 megawatts is kind of a small deal now. Then you look at hundreds of megawatts, and then you think of campuses that are going towards half a gigawatt. Today, the biggest players in the world are looking for gigawatts of capacity to be built. That's a whole different level of consumption. So when you back up and start to see all of these different independent demands, and so, by the way, thank you, DC Byte, for your content. It was extremely helpful with this. Colby Cox, I'm glad that we were able to connect. That input really helped us understand that there are kind of 4 different ways. There's stuff that's live, there's stuff that's being constructed, there's stuff that's in the pipeline, and there's stuff that's on plan. All of those translated to 60 plus gigawatts just within this, and we know that that's going to continue to go up. But what we saw was in these conversations, how could we go back and optimize? Because we know we can't deliver in the markets we're serving right now. As we heard, there's transmission line problems, there's generation problems, there's not in my backyard problems. There's a whole bunch of things that are precluding or limiting us from being able to get there. So then we need to look at that problem and say, if I had to do it over again, what would I do differently? So you step back and say, if I could master plan this, and I could now think about it at scale already, like we were doing with cloud and hyperscale, what is the size of that? And as you heard, it's everything from 100 megawatts to 10 gigawatts. Do we have 10 gigawatt master plan cities and towns right now? No. Should we? Yes. The key is that if we've got this much demand in this short time, we have to come up with a different answer to solve that problem. And what I loved about this concept is, as we brought our executive summit together and all of our advisory council members, in that discussion, we believe we could actually solve all 4 of these problems because of it. So the power, again, well, then you concentrate around where power generation is done. You can now address the sustainability components because I can get clean energy within that location. You can also do the embodied carbon because can I sequester because it's right there? I'm going to have to construct things. So if I'm able to take this carbon and put it into aggregate, and that aggregate creates concrete, and then I have a concrete plant on that actual small city, town, I can now build everything there with carbon negative concrete. Those are the economies of scale that allow that technology to be affordable and the demand localized that allows you to be able to deploy it. And if we do this with multiple industries, so again, you've got like automobile, batteries, right, digital infrastructure, they all have huge power demands. So if we start to combine those, then we can solve it for multiple industries because we're coming together in it. So there's a lot to be done here. And one more factor of this I thought was really cool is that if we are now going to go master plan communities, that means the community will be developed. That means that we integrate within that entire environment, and then we start creating jobs, and families start moving there, and you start to build the actual place in which they live, that they want to live. we can actually design this right from the beginning versus organically growing cities and force-fitting boxes into square, into round holes. So this, I think, is one of those next decade type development things. And if we unite on that, we can solve a ton of these problems. All right. Are there any examples he can point to on the clean energy zones? Or are there zones either in development or retrofitting to meet the demand needs? Yes. Okay. So there is one. If you think about, we had an executive summit, and in that summit, we invited one of our global partners to participate in a broader sense. So DataVolt is one of our new global partners. The executives within DataVolt also came from the power industry in Saudi Arabia. And what they'd done is they created the world's largest green hydrogen plant. And they did this in Saudi. And what they have is 3.9 gigawatts worth of clean energy generation with solar and wind. And the power price standpoint is at 1.5 cents a kilowatt hour. Incredible. First off, just even achieve that. But then all this abundance of clean energy, what they did is they now created green hydrogen with renewable energy. And what that is, it's now in liquid format in ammonia, and that is put on ships, and that's shipped to other areas to power hydrogen buses, like here in London. So there are ways to go back and concentrate around these locations. So that's a huge power generation location, but there are data centers being built up around it. There's also master plan communities around it. So it's a similar concept that's actually been done. And I think this is a really important one. Hydrogen, we want a hydrogen future, but it is a very difficult thing to go back and solve. What we wanted to do is have the people that have done it before come back and sit down with the decision makers of these massive portfolios and say, how could we do it in other places? If Saudi can do that, can we do it in the US? Can we do it in Europe? Can we do it across Asia? That's the learning and the collaboration that we want to be able to have. Okay, and it looks like I'm getting last question, getting the plug pulled. How do we go about improving the perception of data centers in the community? Okay, so this one's near and dear to my heart. We have an effort that started at the Schneider Electric Kohler Power Down Conference that was held in Scotland. And we brought a bunch of executives together, and I participated in that. And Joel Reale and I from Schneider Electric started doing this unsustainable data center, contrarian, thought-provoking exercise. We outlined the 17 things that we believe are holding us back from achieving net zero. And in that one, people were like a little torn because they listened to it going, no, we shouldn't do that. But then like, yeah, that is what the industry norm is. One of the things that emerged from that is data centers are becoming the enemy. Because we're now putting in here and the communities are saying, I actually don't want these data centers. So that spawned one work group to say data centers as a good neighbor. So Siri Denny from Schneider Electric is chairing that committee. I'm executive chair, just trying to help executive sponsor for it. And we brought together leaders and said, how could we go into the communities to change that? And what came from this was something else that also contributed to this report. The trend is very simple. We are overcorrecting on single factors today. In other words, if we come in and do the economic aspect for a community, that should be enough. The reality is it's not. Economic incentives and other things don't solve open space and access to things within that community. So we need to look at it three ways. So what we're doing is building a playbook of how to engage in the community, and it's structured around this strategy: economic, ecology, and social. Each of them in each community might have a different metric, might have different things to consider for that community. It might be an established market or an emerging market. It might be in a tropical area versus a desert. So this playbook that we're putting together, we plan to publish this year, is going to show how we can go back and integrate with communities that solve all three of those at once. If we do that, we're going to now be seen as good neighbors. We're going to get embraced instead of resisted. We're going to enable our ability to grow faster because we've fully integrated in the community, but we haven't put the ecosystem out of whack from a social perspective or from an ecology standpoint or from an economic standpoint. Okay, great. I know there's more questions in there. We're going to follow up with those offline, but I just want to make sure we can wrap this up. Okay. So as I shared at the start of this live stream, digital infrastructure is the new utility. is a necessity to participate in the modern world, just like running water and electricity. It is the great equalizer that enables anyone, anywhere to participate in the digital economy. As demands for digital services doubles and potentially triples the capacity over the next decade, we must build digital infrastructure that integrates with every community in an economically, socially, and ecologically responsible and sustainable way. To achieve this goal, we must collaborate with local government and civic leaders, businesses and investors, and utility and service providers to ensure that our presence in every community creates jobs, improves neighborhoods, promotes equality, and helps restore ecosystem balance. This is true for communities that are established data center hubs and communities poised to gain their first digital infrastructure development. I truly believe our industry has a responsibility to think about how we approach the growth of digital infrastructure to enable everyone to participate in the digital age. If we are going to triple our capacity in the next 10 years, we need to consider moving the data centers to the power versus the power to the data centers. I encourage our innovators and investors in our industry to double down on the clean energy zone concept. So I hope this live stream has provided new insights and items to think about in your role, whether you're inside or outside of the industry. This session is the start of an iMasons webinar series. I will be joined by industry leaders to dive into each of the 4 Ps of the report. The next webinar will be with Siri, Denny of Schneider Electric, discussing the perception of the industry on April 30th at 10:30 a.m. Pacific. Don't miss that. As we close, I want to give a special thank you to our global partners who make what we do at Infrastructure Masons possible. Your contributions and support is invaluable to our combined success. And thank you again to everyone who has attended. I look forward to seeing you on the next webinar as our community continues to deliver a greater digital future for all.